Und da sind wir wieder. Hallo zusammen, hello friends, hallo Franz. Schön, dass noch ein paar Leute hier sind, um mit Joshua Sky zu reden. Nice to see so many people talking to Joshua Sky. Now is your time to give him a hand.
Thanks, guys.
Bevor wir starten, der Fahrer des Wagens Hamm GF595 sollte bitte meinen Ratschlag von gerade eben folgen. Er muss jetzt den Nebenplatz nicht mehr frei halten. Wir haben genug Autos, die auch dahin passen. Es wäre schön, wenn ihr wisst, wer das ist. Hamm GF595. Einmal beiseite rutschen, dass jemand daneben parken kann. Wäre super. Und alle so. Nee, was? Hallo Live-Chat. Hallo Live-Chat von Jeremy. Wenn ihr Fragen habt, wenn ihr dem netten Herrn fragen wollt, dann schreibt sie in den Chat. Ich kann mitlesen und das kriegen wir alles hin. When we have two live chats and when people have questions, they will write and we can ignore it and that's how it goes.
Awesome.
So, now we switch over to English, so we stop talking about you and start talking with you about you. Could you maybe, for those 2 or 3 people who don't know who you are, introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey guys, thanks so much for coming down. My name's Josh Sky. I am a writer based in the US, and I write for publications like Heavy Metal and for shows like Ben 10, and I also write for Masters of the Universe. For the Minicomics. In addition to that, I also write my own fiction and comics as well. So thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here in Germany. I really know that the fans here are very passionate and also do a lot of their own cool stuff. So I'm excited to learn more about it myself. Okay. You guys don't have to clap. It's fine.
The crowd goes wild for you.
Thank you so much. I'm also a part-time stripper, guys, so if you know anyone who needs a freelancer, let me know. Thanks. Okay, appreciate it.
So, we should talk about Minicomics.
Sure.
And we will put through one of our cover on the wall because I didn't have one of yours. Did you get the chance to read?
Yeah, I read Skeletor Imperator, which was a fun little adventure. You know, it's really cool to see the homebrew stuff that people do here in Germany. The art is really cool. And what I really appreciate most about Motu, and I've seen this both on the professional level and on the fan level, and I myself am a fan. I started out as a fan before I went pro, and most of the history of science fiction, fantasy, and comics is a history of fans becoming professionals, actually, is the passion that you see behind every single layer of Motu, from the fans and the sort of stuff the fans are putting out, but also from, on the professional level. Everyone I've interfaced with on the professional level working on the Minicomics, from the toys, the packaging, the design, to the copy, to the stuff I'm working on, everyone really cares a lot about it. So to me, that's my favorite part, that we all kind of had this shared common bond of really caring about this thing.
You guys, you know our Minicomics that we do at Grayskull. And now let's start maybe with this. There's this guy who comes to me and say, hey, Gunnar, write a story. And now I write a story like Skeletor Imperator. I give him the pitch. What would happen next?
So, like, what's the process from my side? Yeah. I think the process from my side is pretty much the process for kind of creating any comic book, really, is that, if you're doing your own thing, you come up with an idea that you really care about, you outline it, you write it, you find an artist, and you pay them or talk them into it, or however you can get the great artists to do their work. And it's kind of like jazz. And through going back and forth, you eventually kind of birth this thing and go to a printer. And the process isn't really that much different on the professional level. Like, generally, of course, from any company, there are certain guardians of the the lore, people who really care that you kind of not only stay in line with what the lore is, but being true to who those characters are. And for me, my creative process is really, when it comes to any assignment, generally the assignment will have parameters. And this is for any company, really. And then I'll write a pitch. I try to keep it down to 1 page and make a very tight story. And what I really am most concerned about in the story is, what is this really about, and how am I going to emotionally move the reader? Because I feel like nothing really matters unless you emotionally move the reader. And whether that's a laugh or making them feel something, because if you can make the reader feel something, then they become attached to the material, and if they become attached to the material becomes real to them, and to me that's really important. And of course they become attached to the writer and they want to read your other stuff. So
just slow down.
Sorry,
no, it's okay. You're doing great.
Okay,
doing
cool,
great.
cool.
But just now you write a pitch, and how much freedom do you have to include your own ideas, and do you get many corrections? People saying that's okay, but we need this character and this character. What are the boundaries that you had to move in?
I mean, again, the boundaries are kind of like with any major company, I would say, and the boundaries are really about.
So these people do not know what generally the boundaries are.
Oh, right. Well, I just have to be careful about what I'm allowed to talk about and not allowed to talk about, of course. But what I can say is this: generally, the boundaries are, if you're given an assignment from a company, there are certain things you need to include, and that can change. They could say you need to include certain characters and you need to tell a certain type of story in a certain tone. And it's up to you within those boundaries to create, there's a lot of, I guess, really what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of freedom, actually. There's a lot of freedom within reason, as long as you're being true to the tone of that world. So are you free to create characters? Sometimes, yeah, you are. Are you free to use other characters? Sure, but it all has to kind of make sense in the context of kind of the needs of the assignment, if that makes sense. So
yeah, is there maybe when I think of big companies, of course you think DC and Marvel, and when you think Marvel, you think like the MCU, and they got this big red line from connecting from Iron Man to Endgame.
Right.
So when you read the movie, of course, there will be Kevin Feige telling you what should happen. Is that, do you get this input as well?
No, I would say that it's more about who appears in the stories than what must happen in the stories. So there is a lot of freedom. There's a tremendous amount of freedom, and also a lot of responsibility where, people ask me a lot, what is your goal when it comes to writing Motu or any of the stuff that you're writing? And I have 2 goals. Goal number 1 is to tell a really great story, but goal number 2 is just to not screw up the gig and to be true to whatever the property it is that I'm writing for. So if you guys really want to know what I'm thinking, those are the 2 things. I really, it's a tremendous privilege to be able to write for Motu. So I just don't want to screw it up, I guess, So I hope that helps. But to continue from the process, once that outline gets approved, then I write the script. And writing for the mini-comics may seem simple, but it's actually quite a complex process from a writing standpoint, because the mini-comics in general, and this isn't just for this property, it's any property, is a medium of constraints. Especially the average mini-comic has about 6 pages, and the average page of a mini-comic can only withstand about 6 panels of story. So you have about 36 panels to tell a story. So within those 36 panels, across those 6 pages, you have to establish who the characters are. You have to establish the conflict in the story. You have to show really cool concepts and tell a really cool story that hopefully emotionally moves the readers, and then you have to resolve it in a satisfying manner. So, and those are just the main constraints of just that form, let alone all these other factors that could play into it.
So you're using this 3 arc structure, like introduction, main part, and conclusion.
I think that, yeah, I think pretty much every story, whether or not we realize it, uses that 3-act structure. It's kind of so embedded from like a polemic, from a, you know, just at a base level. But, you know, there are other rules to it too. For example, like I think Kevin Smith said, and I agree with this, that, you know, comic books is kind of a format that's perpetually in Act 2 because by its very nature, it's serialized, which means it's always continuing a story. There's always a to be continued generally in some of these long form characters. But yeah, generally I keep that format in mind. I do.
Okay. What would you say is when you get to this serialized part? We know that we get He-Man in episode in comic number 1. He will be in comic 522
hopefully,
also.
Hopefully, yeah. Sure.
What would you say? Is it kind of hard to get sort of a thrilling story out of this? When maybe like this, everybody here knows how the comic will end most of the time. So how do you get a thrill out of it?
Oh, I think there's a lot of ways to get thrills out of it. I mean, He-Man, the Motu universe is so exciting. It's an extremely colorful and thrilling universe. I think that the challenge, and I just want to say, by the way, guys, everything I say is really just for me personally. I'm not speaking for the company. I'm not speaking for any other creatives. This is just my Josh Sky take on things. So please take whatever I say with a grain of salt. But I would say that I think the Motu universe is extremely exciting. I think it's really interesting. And the challenge for me isn't so much how do I keep this exciting? It's how do I narrow this down to one story that I'm trying to tell within this format? Because the stories are kind of endless. I mean, when you just open up any of the Motu material, it just kind of like, it's so colorful, it almost like bursts out at you. So I think that there's just kind of endless potential for it. I wish some of the things were longer, so I could tell longer stories. But I found different ways to do that too. Like a lot of, in my mind, what I've written, I started writing in Wave 11, which had like characters like Boltman and Rattler and stuff like that, and Cobra Khan. Wave 11 starts off with the Rise of the Snake Men. So in my mind, Rise of the Snake Men has kind of had its own arc. And if you pay close attention to different mini-comics, they reference, the issues I've written kind of reference each other in certain points. So one day I'll have to make a grid to like show that. But so in a serialized format, you can tell larger stories too.
So you say you started in Wave 11. How, maybe we take it back a step. How did you get into writing these comics?
Sure. So I originally grew up in Maui, Hawaii, and you know, every place in the world has its own like strengths and limitations for being able to collect in general, right? So Hawaii is kind of a challenging place to collect stuff, like to find rare action figures, to find comic books, because you live on an island. And even to get like certain specific TV shows, I'd have to like tape them in my science class, stuff from Sci-Fi Channel, because my part of the island didn't get Sci-Fi Channel and stuff. But long story short, I grew up there. I grew up loving comic books and science fiction and fantasy. And I went to college in New York City, and I ended up interning at Marvel Comics. And the Marvel that most people read about is very different than the Marvel I worked in, I think. Because when you read about some of your favorite characters, creatives at Marvel, like Chris Claremont or someone like that, or Jim Shooter, a lot of these guys, they kind of, if you were in the building, you probably could end up writing for Marvel or being an artist for Marvel. By the time I had broken into Marvel in 2008, Marvel was kind of this mega conglomerate, and they were only interested in A-list famous talent. So, you know, I had done a lot of writing, and I majored as a screenwriting major in college, but they didn't care if you were really great. They cared whether or not you had kind of guaranteed back sales. So breaking into comics was kind of became a very political animal by the time like I got into the industry at all. So anyway, I worked for Marvel, and I wrote for Marvel.com, and I wrote for storybooks and stuff like that. And I wrote some Avengers spec scripts, and eventually I got an agent, and the agent said, you need to move to Los Angeles. Then I moved to Los Angeles, and I kind of bounced around, and I had written for things like animated series like Ben 10, and I had written for all these different properties, but I realized that the real, a lot of people ask me like, how do you break into a big property? How do you like get the gig? And I don't really know the right answer, honestly, for people, because you can't predict what property you're going to land on. But what I can say is, if you write your own original stuff and it's good, it will find a home. You just have to kind of keep pushing it. And that's what happened for me. I started writing short stories and reading a lot of short stories. And I kind of became obsessed with the format, and I started submitting them around. And eventually I started publishing a lot for Heavy Metal. And Heavy Metal invited me onto their staff. And that became a really perfect training ground for the mini comics, because it's a short story format, and I had a comic book background. So I had written a short story called Basic, which is available here for sale. And that short story was not something that you'd ordinarily think would be something that like you would immediately think, oh, this is from Motu, but it was an emotionally moving story about a guy just trying to find a job in this future where like AI has taken over and finding jobs is really hard. And someone at Mattel had read it, and they said, hey, would you be interested in writing for Motu? And I didn't believe them, honestly, because in Hollywood, like a lot of gigs, unfortunately, don't work out, and it's very competitive. So when they said, do you want to write for Motu? I was like, yeah, sure, me and every other nerd out here. And what ended up happening was they said, let's have a meeting. So I had a meeting with them, and the meeting was great. And again, I literally didn't think anything was going to happen. And then all of a sudden they said, okay, well, we're going to need like 12 to 14 issues written, and the first one's due on this date. And I said, okay, does that work for you? I didn't even look at the date. And I said, yeah, sure, it'll work. And then I got out of the meeting, and I realized, oh my gosh, and it was over Zoom. It was like during the pandemic, I think. And when I'd gotten the gig, I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe I got it. That's so crazy. And then it hit me that I had to write all this material. And then it hit me that that date rung a bell. And I looked at the date in the calendar, and I'm like, that's the date I'm getting married in Mexico. So I didn't want to like go to Mattel and be like, hey guys, I need to change the date. Because remember, one of the goals is to not screw up the gig. So there are pictures of me like in between wedding rehearsals and on the plane working on Wave 11, because I wanted to get the deadline, and I luckily did, and they liked it, which is great. And I've been working on it ever since.
So basically, in the end, you fought the dragon, you conquered the dragon, and you got the girl.
I did get the girl. That's the most important part. She got me, by the way, too. I'm just kidding. No, I got the girl.
By the way, there she is.
Thank you. That's my wife over there. Thank you. Really.
Okay, as you said, every nerd wants to work for He-Man or wants to work for Motu. And now, seriously, how cool is it?
It's very cool. It's honestly, it's not something I take very lightly, honestly. It's a huge privilege. I'm very lucky to work on this stuff, because you have to understand, as I'm someone who loves comics and history, Motu has a history of really amazing artists and writers who've worked on this stuff, So, Neil Adams has worked on it. Stan Sakai, Alfredo Alcala, Larry Houston. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But what's really funny about working on Motu is, if you read, there's a great book by Dark Horse that did a compilation of all the American mini-comics up to a certain point, like I think the mid-2000s or late 2000s. But it's hilarious, because when they interview the original creators on it, the original writers, they're like, I thought He-Man was going to be a flash in the pan, and I thought it was corny was I writing and stuff. And then by the time you get to like my generation, like Tim Seeley and then me, it's like, I can't believe I'm working on Motu. This is so cool. Like, this is the coolest thing in the universe. Because you have to also put things into context. Like I was telling people yesterday, Larry Houston did about 10 issues of the comic series. And I think he did the first issue with Geldor and a number of characters. But when I spoke to Larry Houston, he goes, he's like, yeah, by day I was working on this little animated series called G.I. Joe. And then by night, I was working on Motu. And I'm like, you had the coolest job in the 80s ever. Why did you stop working on the Motu comics? Because my schedule got like really packed. They ended up wanting me to direct G.I. Joe, the TV series. And then they had a movie coming out, so I had to direct the movie. And I'm like, okay, dude. Like, so it's just kind of insane kind of how the attitudes have changed of the creators over the years, though. But the 80s, you had so many properties coming out, and so many of them were flash in the pan, but there's something very enduring about Motu that we still see through today.
What would you say? Just what would you say is so enduring? What makes He-Man that special that he overstayed, or that he stayed until today?
I mean, so many things that kind of made a perfect storm. I think that from a creative level, the archetypes are incredible. Like He-Man as a hero is such a perfect hero. The only thing I can really compare him to is like Superman. You know, when I came on board and I was thinking about some of the original pitches that I had sent, they really came from from the Marvel mindset. And Marvel characters are conflicted. Characters are like, oh, am I good or bad? But He-Man is not that. And that was my initial notes. Like, He-Man is very definitively, He-Man knows that he's good. He knows good and evil. Skeletor is evil. So those archetypes are so perfect. Like, Skeletor is like a perfect villain, I feel. And so you've got that, but then you've got amazing artwork. And then you've this amazing mythology that really kind of burst onto the scene. What historically... As someone who, when I got onboarded, the first thing I had to really do is not only wrap my mind around all the American lore, but like the German stuff, the Italian stuff, the stuff out of Latin America. Because what was unique is when He-Man was licensed initially, all these territories kind of got free license to do their own, well, not free license, but they were given licenses to create their own content. So you have multiple interpretations of a common mythology, but from its like initial Big Bang, you could see that there was something about He-Man that was kind of internationally not only recognized, but people kind of glommed onto creatively. So I would say it's the characters and the artwork that really kind of draw people, and the kind of free license to be optimistic and creative. You know,
yeah. So. We had a talk yesterday that He-Man is mostly a visual medium, and I think that's one of the points. Really good artwork makes really good visuals.
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, and you have some of the greatest artists in comics and fantasy and sci-fi art who've worked on He-Man. You know, I mean, Earl Norm. Oh my gosh! Every time I look at his stuff, it's like, oh, so good. You know, and Axel Jimenez. Oh my gosh, his stuff is so incredible. You know, so I'm just blown away. And when you, as a writer, when you look at that stuff, people go like, what gives you the inspiration when you write the stories? Well, of course, I love reading the lore and the mythology and all these really cool ideas, but I just love staring at the artwork because it's so transportative. Like, it really brings you into that scene. So when I write, I try to write in such a way that hopefully transports the reader that way, or at least the comic artist who's going to render that artwork that way.
So what takes us back to the Minicomics, and you are working on how many did you know by now?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've done released so far. I mean at least 12, I think, but I think at least when the count is done, like from up to this point, I don't know. Hopefully 20 at least. I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Roundabout,
yeah.
Roundabout, yeah. What was the stories that you told? What were the themes you were writing about? You did a lot of Snake Man, for example.
Yeah. Okay, so Snake Men are like the funnest villains to write for, I think. They're very compelling. When they brought me on Wave 11, which was the kickoff for the rise of the Snake Men. And I thought it was just the coolest opportunity to really... I wanted, like you said, like, how do you kind of change things up for Motu and really engage the reader? And you know, any writer wants to put in conflict and a sense of danger. So for me, the Rise of the Snake Men, I wanted to really kick off the plot where everyone's in danger, everyone's in jeopardy. So, you know, the very first story I wrote, He-Man is on the verge of dying because he's been poisoned by the Snake Men. But when you read the following issues, like, so that was Rise of the Snake Man, but when you read Assassin's Aim, you realize that at the same time that He-Man was poisoned, Skeletor, by the way, spoiler alert for anyone who's watching this, but this has been out there for a while, Skeletor, an assassination attempt is made on Skeletor, and then when you read Frogmonger's issue, you realized, oh my gosh, they did like a 3-pronged assassination attempt at the same time of He-Man, Skeletor, and Randor. And I'm like, how do I like ratchet this up even more? And what I love most about the Snake Men, and I think a running theme in what I'm really writing about the Snake Men, is that there is no honor amongst thieves. Even the Snake Men can't trust the Snake Men, right? So King Hiss wants power, but you know, other characters would want power too amongst the ranks. And some things I can't really talk about because of like certain issues that aren't out yet. But like, so to me, that's really the game that I think is being playing, where like when so many people want power and that are vying for it, you know, who can you really trust? And snakes definitely can't trust each other. So that's what makes them compelling. So even if King Hiss gets the power for a while, like one of his henchmen are going to want it from him, you know, whether it be Rattler or, you know, Cobra Khan or Camocom or whoever, you know. So, yeah.
What's your favorite Snake Man when we're on the subject?
Oh, that's really tough. I mean, Axel did so many great designs, you know. I would say my favorite Snake Men are probably Snakeface is my favorite. I know that's not an Axel design. I love Axel's designs, but I think Snakeface is, and I finally landed an action figure yesterday. So I was looking for the Origins one, so I finally found one, and I was really excited. International card, but still amazing.
So when you write Snake Man, what other faction would you like to write about? When they give you, well, think about, they give you the story, say we need a story arc, maybe 10, 12 issues, and you can choose what faction you want to cover and tell a story about.
I'm honestly having a lot of fun writing the Snake Men. And again, like there's a lot of creative latitude that's given. I mean, everyone at Mattel is really brilliant at what they do. And they're really smart and they really understand their stuff. And I just feel really lucky to work with that outfit at all. But I would say I love all aspects of the Motu universe. And I think I think that there was no kind of perfect entry point for me more so than the Snake Men, honestly. So, yeah.
Cool.
Should we open up to the
I'll
audience?
just say, you got any questions? Ihr könnt die Fragen auch auf Deutsch stellen, wenn ihr was habt. Ich übersetze die dann gerne, so wie ich es gerne hätte. Und dann...
You like the Snake Man, so and the story of Moto will have some moments where some good guys transform over to the Snake Man, like Snake and Arms and stuff. Do you have some... Oder muss mir helfen.
Unbedingt.
Einen Charakter wandeln könnte in einen Snake Man. Egal ob gut oder böse oder Horde oder sowas.
Okay. So you know that Man-at-Arms turned into Snake Man at one point in one of the story arcs. Like in 2008, they had this ring who turned the
Serpent's ring.
Yes,
right.
Serpent ring, and they turned it into Snake Man. And the question is, if you could change one character to a Snake Man, whatever, if Skeletor's minions are good guys or the Hordes, who would you like to be a Snake Man?
Who would I like to be a Snake Man? That's a very interesting question. I did get to convert. We saw there was a panel in Crisis at the Multicore at the very start where we got to see He-Man if he looked like a Snake Man, and I thought I got to do that, and that was really cool. And I did show Man-at-Arms as a Snake Man, but it was actually a Snake Man in disguise as Man-at-Arms, right, when they tried to kill He-Man in Wave 11. But if there's another character, it would be kind of cool to see what like Hordak would look like as a Snake Man, or Mosquitor. You know that I have a Mosquitor affinity. That would be interesting looking. Or maybe like what would Roboto look like if he was like a mechanoid snake? I don't know. That would be kind of cool. So I think there's a lot of different directions.
Ja.
Cool. You guys have any other questions here in the room? Do we have anyone in the live chat?
No, actually not.
It's it's like 2 a.m. Oh, let's go right here. Oh, good. Those slackers of the U.S. aren't watching. Perfect.
Can you tell us something about creating a story of Ben 10?
Oh, yeah. So Ben 10 was a really interesting creative process, and also another kind of funny story. I was working at an advertising agency in Los Angeles, and it was a very tough environment. Like, you couldn't miss any work, or you could like get fired for missing like a day or two of work, especially when you were new like me. I was very new. And one of my jobs at the advertising agency was coming up with like quippy slogans, you know, for posters. Like, I wrote for campaigns like Deadpool 2 and The Post and The Predator, you know, and Love, Death, and Robots. You would come up with like, you know, this time it's for real, you know, stuff like that for the posters. And that's fun. That's not my like passion, but it was a fun writing exercise. And I'd gotten a call, and they said, "Hey, can you come in for Ben 10? We'd love for you to come in to the writer's room because we're going to be breaking story." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I got another call, and they said for that same day, it was another animated series. It was Nico and the Sword of Light. And we're like, "We're going to need a coordinator in the writer's room. Are you interested?" And I was very interested in both, and I knew I could do both on the same day. I could do the writer's room assignment. I could go for the job interview, but I might get fired from this job that I had. And I also got a call, but it was on a different day I don't get this lucky all the time. This was a perfect storm. And then Mattel needed, at the time, there's a temp agency that said Mattel might need a copywriter for Jurassic Park. So I said, okay, I can't do the Jurassic Park thing because it's just another day, but I'm going to try and do this Ben 10 thing. So I take the day off from work and pretend to be sick, which I'm not. I'm a horrible liar. So they knew I was lying, right? I was like, I just don't feel good. And then I left, right? So, so then I go into Ben 10, and we break a story, and that was a really cool experience. We were in the room with the creators of the series, or two of the co-creators, Steve Siegel, who's brilliant comic book writer. I mean, he's written for It's a Bird is probably one of my all-time favorite Superman graphic novels. Definitely worth reading. And then another guy, I can't believe his name's escaping me, Duncan Relu, another brilliant comic book creative. So they basically, we literally all together, we broke down the outline, about a page or two of what the story would be. And my episode was called Big in Japan. And we broke down how it would be. And my job was to like kind of take that sort of genesis of an idea and then script it out. So I got the assignment. Great. Then I drove to another part of Hollywood. I did the interview for that other series. Great. The next day I showed up at work and they fired me, right? And then the next day I got that other job that I interviewed for. So the timing was like perfect, also horrible, but perfect. Anyway, long story short, so that's how the Ben 10 thing did. So I wrote the episode, and a lot of the stuff is, you know, this is kind of a lot of big IP is you write the thing and you kind of send it into a black box, and other creatives come in. And in that instance, for an animated series, the story editors and then the animators and the voiceover. And eventually they just kind of send you an air date, and you go and you watch it, and they send you a check. And that's kind of how it worked. And I've done that a couple of times for Ben 10 and some other animated series. And it's an interesting experience. And it's one of those things where you just never know when you're going to get to write an episode. That's why so many people, they're like, "What's your advice about writing?" I'm like, you just got to create your own stuff. That's what's going to get those IPs. But more importantly, you can create your own schedule of work and output, because otherwise, if you're just relying on IP stuff, it's very unpredictable.
Eine Frage. Wir haben noch Zeit. One question. We got time for one more question.
You had from Mattel. There's like 3 complete origins stories that you've made up. It was Frogmonger, Fangor, and the new Lady Slither coming up.
Cadaver. Spoiler alert. But there's a character in, and this is out already and public knowledge and has been posted about a lot. But there is a new character in the Skeleton 2-pack that I wrote an origin story for, like a fresh new origin story that we haven't seen before.
And like you were mentioning, Mattel just gave you free reign to tell whatever story. Did they have? Was there anything that you had to change that you would have liked to do in the stories, but they kind of said don't do that or don't go that way, or?
No, honestly, they're just so smart in terms of their decision making, and I never felt really constrained. I I had sent them a few options, and they picked one that I happened to be, I would have been happy writing any of the options that I had sent, but they picked the one that appears in that story, and I really had fun writing it, But what's cool, again, is that a lot of those people on the other side of the line at Mattel, they're all fans. The people doing... Axel's a fan, just like us, and he does the artwork. The package designer, Roy, he's a fan. So they're all really great to work with and for, and they really know their stuff. But yeah, Frogmonger was another interesting one where they showed me the sticker, and I'm like, gosh, what am I going to do? And I kind of wrote an outline based on what I thought this character could be, and they approved it. And then I wrote the script. There are sometimes variants of things, Things do change. The hardest part to me isn't writing the scripts. That's the funnest part. The hardest part is if characters get switched out and the script needs to get re-engineered. But that happens with any assignment, where you have to kind of like reshape the material that already exists and kind of like move things around, but also have it make sense and still be compelling. That's the hardest part, I think. So, but yeah, it's been fun writing all these character stories and continuing adventures too are equally fun. I love just trying to write new concepts and new ideas too, and the format is challenging. I mean, 6 to 8 pages to tell a story is like. So that's why in a lot of my work you'll see like montage panels, I call them, where there's just epic epic background of what happened before in one panel with multiple scenes within the same panel, because that's the best way I think you can compress it but still be compelling. So.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, if you... in 5 minutes, we think, oh, I should have asked him this, I should have asked him that. He's not leaving the convention yet. He is at his place, at his desk, doing what we tell him to do, and might be able for a chat now and then.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be here through this evening and probably early night, and then I'm out tomorrow. So feel free to ask me any questions, or if you guys want, just want to chat about something, I'm totally open. And it's really been an honor, and it's really cool to meet you guys and see what you guys are up to. Okay.
So. Der Mann da ist mit einem Zettel reingekommen. Das ist, okay, wunderbar. Wir machen ein kurzes Päuschen, bauen alles auf für die Auktion. Dann gibt's Mittag. Denkt daran, dass die Lose mittlerweile zur Verfügung stehen. Überlegt doch mal, wie eure Parksituation ist. Raucht nicht draußen, geht nicht mehr rot über die Ampel und esst nicht den gelben Schnee. Wir sehen uns später.